Hello, it's Pam again at Quilt Beginnings in Dublin, Ohio, and today we're going to talk about the decorative stitches. So once again, we're in our sewing category, so we're going to touch sewing. In the last video, we concentrated on utility stitches, which is everything we use to construct garments with a few fancy stitches, but things like buttonholes, sideways sewing, that kind of thing. So today, we're going to go to our character and decorative stitches. So when I touch this, it brings up a different category. Now, again, your machine may not look exactly like this. On the Solaris, we have our categories across the top, and again, we can scroll through with our finger, etc. And on some of your machines, you're going to see that you've got little boxes here that have the categories. So there's a lot more stitches on the Solaris, a few more categories on the Solaris. But once we touch a stitch, again, the same things apply. If we touch our reverse key and our scissors, it creates a tie-off at the beginning of the stitch application. We can choose to stitch with our needle always in the down position or ending in the up position. And again, we have the pivot function. So these are at the bottom of most of your screens, and once we touch something on here, it's going to activate or highlight those keys. So anyways, the first category here is category 6, and it has just a bunch of decorative stitches on here. So again, you can scroll through and you can just see all kinds of stitches. So the Solaris has category 6, it has category 7, again with tons of stitches, category 8, and you're going to see that eventually we're going to get to, if you're on a Destiny or an Ariel or a Altair, you're going to see that as we get down here, your categories are going to look more familiar. Okay, so if we go to our first category, and on the Solaris it happens to be category 6, you'll see that if I grab any stitch, it puts it on the screen in real time. So again, your stitches may look different, but again, whenever you pick a stitch, it just puts it up on the machine. Now, the Solaris has an edit function, but for most of you, this category just comes up automatically. So what this allows us to do is all kinds of different things. So I'm going to pick a stitch, this one that looks kind of like a fork or a rake. And your machine, if it has this icon on here, it allows us to flip that image over the horizontal axis. So if I touch it, it flips it from the forks pointing down to the forks pointing up. If I choose something like this stitch here, if I touch this, it mirrors it over the vertical axis. So these two keys are mirror images either over the horizontal axis or the vertical axis. So any stitch that we pick, if these are highlighted, you can flip those stitches. Again, any category that I go to, if I open up my edit function, it brings up things that I'm allowed to do versus things that I'm not allowed to do. So if these are highlighted, you're able to activate those. Okay, so let's make a chain of stitches here. So I'm on a Solaris, so I've touched the plus, and let's say I grab the tree. Okay, now because I have the plus sign activated, if I touch another pattern, it assumes that I want to make a chain of stitches. Okay, and let's say I grab a third stitch. Now I've got a pattern of 3. And you can see that once I started adding, it changed it from 3 stars to 1 star. When I touch 3 stars again, now it's making a chain of stitches. Okay, so I'm going to hit delete. I delete the third, the second, and the first. So let's do that again. When I touch this one, it makes multiples. My multiple stars are highlighted. If I go ahead and touch any other key, it assumes that I want to make a pattern. It's changed it to 1 star now. So now every time I touch something, it's adding 1. If I want to repeat this pattern, I'm going to touch the 3 stars, and there's my repeat. Okay, if I activate these two, my tie-offs, when I go to start sewing, it's going to do a tie-off, and then it's going to start my patterns. But now we have these buttons over here that have new functions. Okay, so when I start sewing this pattern, it's going to do the tie off because I told it to do a tie off. And as it sews, as the tree finishes, you see the tree goes off the screen. Okay. Now, if I hit this button, because I had my tie-offs depressed, it did an automatic tie-off right there. No matter where I'm at, it does a tie-off. So if I'm running off the fabric, I just hit this and it does a tie-off immediately. Okay, so this was doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and it started pattern number 1 again. Let's say I was doing a blouse and I wanted to start back at the beginning of this. I don't want to start, right now I'm in the middle of half of a tree. So if you look up here with the needle and you see a pattern, the needle is at the beginning of pattern, and that's exactly what this is. So if I touch this, it takes me back to the beginning of that pattern. So if I put my presser foot down and start sewing, it's going to start at the beginning of the tree. So to show you, I'll stop in the middle. I'm stopping in the middle of a different one right now. So you can see I stopped just in a kind of a weird place. If I touch the beginning of pattern, so it's the needle at the beginning of a pattern, it's going to go back and it's going to start right at the beginning of the tree. Now, the next function is this one. So when I'm sewing, if I touch this button, it's going to finish the current pattern and do a tie off. So in other words, I had a pattern, 4 different things, 1, 2, 3, 4. This one finished number 3 before it did the tie off. Again, if I go back to the beginning of the pattern, if I start sewing, if I touch this one, it's going to finish the current pattern, which is the tree, and then it's going to do a tie off. Okay, so it finished the tree and stop. Now, if you're sewing, so let me go back to the beginning of pattern one more time, and I'm going to start sewing one more time. If you wanted to finish the full pattern, which in this case is 4 items, if I just touch my 3 stars to 1 star, it's going to finish the sequence of 4 items, and then it's going to do the tie off. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So in review, if you've got multiple things on your screen, this makes multiples. This icon here is the beginning of pattern, but the big difference is the way we do a tie off. If you have your tie offs depressed and you touch the reverse key, it does a tie off immediately wherever you're at. If you touch this one, it's the end of pattern button, so it's going to finish the current pattern and then tie off. And if you touch the 3 stars back to 1 star, it's going to finish the entire pattern and then cut. All right, another thing I want to show you that is on the Solaris, as opposed to the other machines, we can actually adjust length and width on the Solaris. On most of your machines, you're going to see that you have an L or an S, and the default is L, which is large, and S, which is small. So if you look on your sidebar and you see the LS buttons, on most of the machines, you only have the option to either make it a large tree or a small tree, but these are grayed out down here. So if you just see little dashes down here, that means you can't change the length or the width. On the Solaris, you can, and you can make these within the parameters. So I could change the width of these, and I can go smaller, but I can't go larger. Okay, so there's a lot more flexibility when I am on this machine. Okay, so again, if I go to the other categories and scroll through, I want to take you to this category, which is your, let me move it back just a little bit. These are what are called adjustable satin stitches. Let me get to the right category. So if you choose these, you're going to see that these are really thick stitches. And if you notice, when we're in the decorative stitch category, we're always going to use our end foot. And if you remember the previous video, the end foot has that open channel on the back, so the satin stitches has somewhere to form. So when we get to this category, and all of your machines will have this icon on it, these are just some really thick, beautiful satin stitches. When we get to this category is what they're calling, on most of your machines, it's not an adjustable stitch, so these are going to be grayed out down here. But if I go to my edit function on the Solaris, and on your other machines, you're going to see it right here. This has a half moon, which adjusts between 1 and 5. And so when I adjust it, you're going to see that when it goes to 4, it gets longer, 5, then it gets shorter. This is a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So on a lot of your machines, you can't adjust the numbers here, but we can adjust the stitch length up here. I'm going to close this out so you can see the next category. You all have a cross stitch category. So these look like counted cross stitches. So for example, if you wanted to do like a vintage pillowcase, you could choose one of these stitches, and it's going to do a counted cross stitch, which you used to see like on pillowcases that maybe your grandmother used to do. And when I get to category, I'm going to scroll over here. This category, and you're going to have to look for it on your machine, these are stitches that were brought over from the utility stitch category. Why did we do this? These stitches in utility stitches, you can't chain them together, but in character and decorative stitches, we can chain them together. So if you are looking for something and you wanted to do like, again, one of these on a pillowcase, tablecloth, something like that, you can add stitches or chain stitches together. Then we also have several categories of fonts. So on most of your machines, you have all 3 of these categories, and this one happens to have the other category here, but basically you have a block letter font, a script letter font, and an open block font. So I'm going to choose this category so that you can see it, and I'm going to touch my plus key, and let's say I wanted to write the word quilt. I'm going to put my Q in, got to add. And if you want your lowercase letters, here are your lowercase letters, your numbers, and some of your exclamation points, things like that, punctuation marks. So to go to my lowercase letters, I can put in my U and my I. And again, you're going to see on the Solaris, I can adjust length and width. But if you're on one of the other machines and you grab this, your categories are large and small. You're going to notice that when we do the lettering, it comes in on its side, and that's exactly how it's going to sew out. So if this is my fabric, it's going to sew exactly as it looks here. And these are to do quick little labels. For most of you, if you have the embroidery part of it, the embroidery component, you're not going to use these because you do have to kind of monitor your fabric, where in embroidery, it just goes by itself. But you do have the script letters, and you have the open letters, and of course I believe these are the Cyrillic letters. So again, they're just going to be a chain of stitches that you're going to sew on the fabric as opposed to embroidering on your fabric. One of the things that you may have noticed on your machine is these 2 little arrows down here. And this used to only be available in this category of stitches here. But you're going to notice that if we go to any of the categories, these arrows are going to show. So what these do is, let's say that I want to do a staggered stitch. If I touch this, and then I touch the arrow here, and I touch the stitch again, what it does is it jumps over one place and makes a staggered stitch. Or I could jump over 2 or 3 places and put a stitch here. And if I touch the left arrow, it goes back that way. So I can stagger my stitches, and I can do the same thing as I did before by making a whole row of these kind of stitches. So all these other buttons work the same way as they did in the previous categories, but the arrows down here just allow us to stagger the stitch, moving it over one, and I think you can go several places to the left or right, but it's kind of a fun way to cover more area on your fabric. Okay, and then one of the stitches that a lot of people don't know that are on these machines is what are called maxi stitches. And you're just going to have to kind of look for them, but I'm going to show you how to find them. So I just happen to know that on this machine, they started about 6-111. So I'm in category 6. Some of the machines, it's in the 6-200 numbers, but I just want to go to 6-110. The maxi stitches start here, but if I go to this stitch, 6-110, you're going to see that this stitch is 100%. So what that's telling you is this is real time. This is what your stitch is going to look like. So I'm going to delete that stitch and close this field out. If I go to 6-111, and that's where they start on this machine, you're going to see that there's a 50%. So whenever you see a stitch that doesn't say 100%, and again, you're just going to have to find where they start. So I know that these go from about here to here, okay? This is 50% of the pattern, but these are really cool stitches if you wanted to quilt like a real quick 2-inch border. So we've got like this stitch and this stitch. And so this one's 100%, so that's not one. But I love this one here. So this is 6-114. So what happens is when I put this in here and I start it, it is going to be this really pretty like wave. And the idea is to keep the presser foot parallel to your border or parallel to the edge of the fabric. And you can see it's just doing this huge maxi stitch. I'm going to stop it. I could have depressed my automatic tie off. But you can see it's just a cool, you know, it would really fill in a 2-inch border very easily. Now, one thing that I can do is I can grab a stitch like this and do an add. And I can go back to a smaller stitch, like, let's grab something like this. So now I've got a big stitch and a little stitch, and I can go here and repeat that pattern. So now when I do it, I can combine my maxi stitches with my other stitches. So they're kind of fun to play with, and it's just if you wanted to quilt a border just really quick. So there's my big stitch, and now it's doing my little stitch. And it's going to do the big stitch, and then it will do a little stitch. And remember, not all stitches play well together. So I'm going to stop this and cut it automatically. So when you look at this, you know, you're going to see a jump stitch here. So, you know, you can play and see what stitches look good together. But what's nice about this is you can do just all maxi stitches or combine maxi stitches with your regular size stitch. Okay, so now we're going to talk about couching. And what couching is it's putting a decorative thread or ribbon on your fabric. So in this case, I'm going to use a decorative ribbon that is about 1/16 of an inch to probably 1/8 of an inch is going to be okay. But if you're on a Solaris or you have a Destiny upgrade, you got this big dual feed foot, which is your walking foot. And I love to use this for couching. So I can't sew with twine. I can't sew with like some of the really thin cording fabric. But I can put it on my fabric very easily by using the couching features that are built into the machine. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to attach our walking foot or our dual feed foot. And in your machine, depending again on which machine you have, you got 2 dual feed feet. The one that has the red lines on it, it's just a dual feed foot for if you want to do walking foot, you want to, you know, feed your fabric together, stitch in the ditch, those kind of things. And you can buy more feet that fit on this dual feed foot. But the 2 that come with the Solaris are just this one that has multiple size increments on it. And then we're going to use the one that has this little hole in it, which is a couching foot. That's where our ribbon or our twine or whatever is going to go through it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our walking foot and we're going to attach it to our machine. And the easiest way to do, it's going to fit over the screw. So I've taken my ankle off. I'm going to approach it from the back of the machine. I'm going to put the screw, that one part's going to go over the screw, and I'm going to tighten my screw. After I tighten my screw, I'm going to take this part and plug it into the back of the machine. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is take our couching attachment, which looks like this. Now there are two different couching attachments with the Solaris, so you want to make sure you get the one that looks like this. And it's going to attach, there's a little plastic piece here that is going to attach right on the side of your machine like that. The next thing we're going to do is take our couching foot, and it's easier to place your, whatever it is you're going to feed through here, your twine, your ribbon, whatever. It's easier to feed it through before you attach the foot. Okay, so now I need to feed this through the hole in the foot. And this ribbon's just a little bit wide, but we'll make it work. So you can see that's hard to get through there. So you got in your kit, it's a little needle threader, so it comes on a card in a package. This is what you're looking for in your kit. And this works, I don't know if you ever had kids with braces, but this is what they use to floss through braces. So like if you lose this, you can just pick one of those up in the dental aisle at your favorite store. But I'm going to put this through the hole, so I know it's kind of hard to see. I'm going to put this through this hole, and then I can feed this through this hole. So if you're doing twine cord, you know how hard it is to get that through, but that's basically what this does. If you lose this, the thing that you use on braces, you can pick that up anywhere. But I'm going to pull it through here, and I want to make sure it's coming out the back of my foot. And if I'm using ribbon, I want the ribbon to be basically flat. So I think it's easier to put this through before you attach your foot. So now I am going to attach the foot to my machine. Okay. So once that's attached, if you're on a Solaris, if you don't know what this is that came in your machine, it is a magnetic spool stand. So this, when you open it up, we're going to pull it up like this and pull it up. And this could hold spools of threads. It just attaches back here with a magnet. But since I'm couching, I'm going to put it like at half mast. So what I want to be able to do with this is has hands-free sewing. So I'm going to put my thread or my twine through this part here and through this back part here. And then I'm going to put it through my spool things here. And I can lay it on here. Now, if you don't have this set up, you can just let your little thread, yarn, whatever, just hang behind your machine. It'll work fine. But the purpose of this is to give you hands-free sewing. So one thing I want you to notice is we're going to go to our utility stitches. And when I go, once I've plugged in my cord in the back here, if I'm in my utility stitches, and so this is in utility, not in decorative, I don't know if you can see here, but some of the stitches are grayed out. So any stitch that is grayed out, you can't use for couching. So if I go to category 2, I'm trying to find a category that might, if I go to category 3, I don't know if you can see on this screen, but anything that's grayed out, you can't use for couching. My personal favorites, I like category 2, and I like this one that looks like a feather stitch right here, which happens to be 212 on this machine. And it's showing that I need my dual feed foot. And what I'm going to do now is when I put this in here, and I lower my presser foot and I start, it's going to just sew this, and I can go around corners, I can go, and this is flat ribbon, so it's going to be a little harder, but you can see I can just go around like this and catch that thread. I can also just do a straight stitch. So if I want to do a straight stitch on here, it just goes down and grabs that thread. And another favorite that I like is in category 2. It's the one that looks like a ladder stitch, 215. but these are fun to play with. Now, if you were doing this on multiple pieces, when you get done and cut your thread, what you want to do is pull this towards the back so that you keep this piece, twine, ribbon, whatever, towards the back here so you're ready to go again. But if I pull this down, you can see how easily that couched on there. There's my straight stitch and there's my ladder stitch. So it's just a really fun way to be able to add decoration to your fabrics. I love using the thin cording, multiple colors. You can use variegated thread, but it's just a lot of fun to play and add some texture to just an ordinary piece of fabric. So as you can see, even though you can count the number of decorative stitches that are on your machine, the possibilities are endless once you start combining stitches, adding things like couching, etc. So don't be afraid, just play with it. You can't hurt the machine, and the machine will tell you. It will give you a message right on screen if you're doing something that it doesn't like, and it'll tell you how to fix it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.